You ever have a situation where someone has crossed a line, a hard line in the sand, is something that you were sure that it was a definite boundary, and then you wonder how to react. Do I push back? Do I just sit back and chill, brush it off? It can be kind of frustrating. It can be complicated, but maybe it doesn't have to be. So this is Mental Fitness Friday. I'm Larry McInnes. You are awesome. And this is Jason Blount. Jason Blount.
Close enough. Close enough.
Blount. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Larry. Hey, Larry. How you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, I'm having a good day.
All right. So, who are you? What's your gig, and why the hell should we care?
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I'm right now. I do coaching. Prior to that, I was a firefighter, paramedic for 25 years, chief officer. And why you should listen to me? Well, I think we've all got our life experiences that brought us to some point that brought some big changes in our lives, some big realizations. And I think there was a point in my life with my divorce, with the loss of my career, finances, it just forced a big shift upon me. And I had to really look, I had to face what was going on, first of all. But in the process of that, I was very, very angry and very hurt, and rightfully so. But I took a long time to figure out what my role in all that was and take responsibility. And that was really the big shift in it all is gaining some understanding on when something bad happens to you, you can find fault in somebody. You can see what's obvious in front of you, and that becomes your focal point. That becomes your tunnel vision, or it did for me anyway. And then over the course of time, as I learned more about things that were happening in the fall of all those things falling apart, I began to look and see within myself where I was culpable. I had a counselor that say that your hand is on the bloody knife too. And so I started taking more responsibility. And oddly enough, the more responsibility I took out of the situation, the more freed I felt. I was freed from bitter and angry and resentful. And I can still look at the past and see where a wrong thing was done or wrong things. And I don't have to take responsibility for those, certainly. But I started looking and seeing what led up to those things and how I handled myself when things fell apart. And it was really my journey. And one of the biggest word picture, if I could share it with you, is when I was in a counseling session. My counselor was telling me what a healthy mindset is, what a healthy relationship looks like. I wasn't getting angry. I was very much in my mind and trying to be very rational about what was going on. And he said, "Don't you get angry?" I said, "Of course I get angry. I'm very angry." He says, "You don't act like it. And you've lost everything." And it was a bit of an epiphany that I've got a lot to learn because I'm not connected with my emotions fully. Well, we started exploring things more, and it felt like I was in a dark room where he was describing the furniture, the windows on the wall, the paintings, where the door is. And I couldn't see any of it. So I told him, I can't see. I don't understand what you're telling me. I literally don't understand some of these concepts, some of these things that today I've got a bright, shining light on all of it. But at that time, it was very dark, and I started to learn more about myself. I started to unlearn things that were unhealthy, and the things that were healthy were pretty foreign to me, very uncomfortable to kind of behave that way. Not to say that I was completely a mess, but just simple ways of boundaries and respecting myself and speaking my mind and not being passive, not being self-protective and being judgmental. Coming out of that darkness, I started to see what all that things that were in my subconscious, kind of the tape that was running behind, the recording rather, that was running behind my life, my mindset, how it was affecting how I showed up with people in my surroundings, my world. So I started unlearning those things that weren't serving me, and I started learning how to operate better. And it started with thinking how I thought of myself, how I thought of my experiences, the meaning I gave to it.
Wow. So um, you said an important word, and that was taking responsibility for
Yeah.
your. For, um, I came. I think I had a similar epiphany where I didn't call it so much responsibility, but I called it ownership,
Yeah.
and it really gave me similar power. I think that you're describing.
About ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the same verbiage. I mean, it's different verbiage, but maybe it's the same meaning. It is. It's taking ownership for of your of your way you think things, the way you process it, the way you internalize it. I think one of the worst things we can do um, is think emotionally when something happens. When we let our emotions dictate, that person said something to me that offended me, therefore they must be purposefully offending me,
Mm,
as opposed to being thoughtful about it, taking ownership instead of letting our emotions run away with us. It also
mhm,
means realizing in a given situation, relationships, for example, is a big obvious one. Um, and this could play a part, in parenting and in leadership too, of course. It is understanding our roles and what things are not our roles, what things are not our responsibility. And in that delineation is to say, this is what my responsibilities are for. And in order for this relationship to be successful, this parenting to be successful, this leadership to be successful, I have to take responsibility for what is mine
mm,
in this relationship. I have to take
uh-huh.
ownership for it. And I have to embrace it, and I have to manage it. I have to maintain it.
Yeah, when I was thinking of ownership, especially in terms of my own divorce, and
Mhm.
basically I was the one responsible for the divorce. Um, it was um, take ownership of it, own it, so it doesn't own you.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that was my source of freedom. That similar to what you were talking about.
Yeah. I like that phrase. It really is it, because when you are, otherwise you're a victim. It owns you.
Mm,
It owns you. You're a victim because you've given away all your responsibility, your power. You've given away um, so much territory because you're giving all that to somebody else, and you're being a victim. And I like that term because now it owns you. That problem now owns you.
mm,
And now every time you speak of it out loud, everyone will know that. And it's a whole different conversation when you talk about things
yeah,
from that standpoint, as opposed to saying, this is the things that I own in this. This is the things that I
yeah,
learned. Because when you say you own it or you take responsibility, then you can transition from the problem to go, and you know what, here's what I learned from it. Because now you're talking about the
mhm,
solution from it. And here's what I've grown from it. And when that time comes, when somebody comes across your path that needs that advice, you can not so much um, preach to them or pull them aside and tell them what thing to do, but you can offer your testimony, your story from that standpoint.
mhm, mhm. So how do you? You made a differentiation between what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible
Mhm.
for. Things
Mhm.
out of your control, I suppose.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's not always clear. I don't think like how do you determine if it's me or if it's them?
Well, some things are just blatant. A decision somebody else makes is their decision, theirs alone. But how you handle yourself in the midst of that, that's all your responsibility. When we say, well, that person made me mad. Well, that person made me get so upset that I hit them. That person made me so upset that I pulled all the money out of their account. That person made you do nothing. You made yourself do something, but you are scapegoating them and saying now that's their fault. It's not their fault. What they did or didn't do, that's their fault, their responsibility. But how you deal with that is
Mm,
totally your ownership. You own that. And then whatever led up to that, that's where the real detective work begins, with some humility and curiosity, is to see what led up to that event, that misunderstanding, that sin, that betrayal, whatever it is, that you can look okay, what led up to that led to that misunderstanding? What led up to that in that relationship for that person to think you no longer love them? What led up to that in that leadership role where the people that you're leading, they've lost sight of how you lead? You
Oh
can
yeah.
then you can go back and say, what is my culpability in this? What's my responsibility? And that's where those boundaries set in, where you can know that you know that you know what your responsibilities are for. And then, the hard work can be in that, and it was for me, was I don't like what I'm getting back, because this means that I made some big mistakes that I didn't see before. And that's where the real roll up your sleeves kind of work begins with yourself, is to determine, now that I know there's some things in my life that need work, what does that look like? How do I dig in and make those things better? I use the word fix. That's probably not the right word, but how do I learn from this and grow? How do I take those things that I found are my responsibilities, and now what do I do with them? Because that means I may have to act a different way, approach life a different way. It can be a little scary if all we knew was one way before. Yeah. In some ways, it was for me.
So do you have a tactic or a technique or an exercise that you do to, once you find the problem, and like how you react to whatever? Do you have a technique or to prevent that from happening in the future?
Yeah, I do now. But Larry, I think it's, for me, I was so in need of education that I became a reader where I wasn't a reader before. And I found whatever subject I was reading was really affecting me. I found myself wanting to read up on it, or to listen to podcasts, or listen to something that's going to teach me, however I could ingest it. And sometimes it's reading. And when I read, I would fall asleep. So I would listen to audiobooks, or I would listen to podcasts, or if I knew people that had the answer, I would certainly go to them and ask them questions. So you have counselors and coaches and trusted advisors, and people that are trusted close to you, that aren't just yes men or yes women or have their own agenda, but people that are safe to talk to. So I became a student of myself because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I would start investigating things. And then I started cultivating a whole new lexicon, a way of speaking, different understanding things better. And this took me a process. This is long walks on trails, listening to audiobooks and so forth, just kind of saturating myself with this information. And then one subject led to another, and then growth happened. And then what was unconscious before is slowly kind of creeping into my conscious, where now I can not only recite something I read or heard, but now I get the concepts, and now I know how to apply them. So it's been a growth process to where now I know a better way of going into a situation. First of all, a relationship, for example, whether it's leadership or a business or a personal relationship, how I can speak up for myself, how I don't hold back. I talk honestly and boldly if necessary, not to start an argument, but to state who I am and what's important to me, what my needs are. And so I know that up front, that's very valuable, as opposed to holding back and being a quote unquote nice guy where you're trying to play a role to make somebody else happy. And in what you're doing is you're sacrificing yourself to make somebody else happy. And then when things kind of, as they often do, they slip past me, and I realize, why am I in kind of a funk today? Why am I ticked off why am I feeling ticked off or anxious about something? Has nothing, whatever's going on right now, I have no reason to be anxious about it, but I had this underlying kind of undercurrent feeling. And we were talking about this just the other day about this. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of sit back, find a little bit of quiet time, and just kind of go back through the day and find out where that feeling is popping up. And you just literally just kind of walk yourself back through the day, and things that have happened, thoughts that have popped up. And more times than not, I find, I had something in my business life that upset me, that frustrated me. And it kind of planted a seed that's kind of grown. And now I dropped my coffee mug and I spilled coffee on the counter. It was a mess. And then I burned my eggs. And I'm just kind of one thing building on another. Now I'm up to something that's really important, a relationship. And I'm going into this conversation with somebody with this little bit of angst. And it doesn't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll realize it's just a series of events. And it was probably something very important with that work frustration. And now all these little things are just kind of building up. And sometimes, you catch them and then, you put them in their place. And sometimes they don't. They kind of slide by and they infect the rest of the day. So I've learned to go back and find out and go, okay, that's what's eating at me. And then I can just kind of let my feelings just kind of not judge them, but just let them go. Even though I'm kind of feeling that way as I'm having a conversation with somebody I'm having a relationship with, I just realize it has nothing to do with them. I even may say, it's kind of an off moment right now. So if I'm feeling a little edgy, feeling a little anxious, just know that I'll give me a little bit of time and it'll wear off.
So, in wrapping up here a little bit, what one piece of advice or a nugget of wisdom can you give to our viewers and listeners?
Nugget of wisdom. Let's see. We would all do.
I can see you rummaging through your Rolodex of nuggets of wisdom there.
Yeah, right in front of me. I was just thinking. There's so many things I've learned, and I get kind of chatty now that you've uncorked me. I think it's really important that we be curious and humble, and in conversations we listen to understand as opposed to be offended. Sometimes we look for the opposition and we're looking to be offended. We listen to understand and not so much to have a response. That when we are in a given situation, whether we're in traffic or whether we're in a relationship or whatever, that we don't think with our emotions. And that means, like I said at the beginning, that just because we feel upset about something somebody said about us, it doesn't mean that they said that to purposefully upset us. So the one that marries right up to that is don't take things personally.
Yeah.
They aren't meant to be personal. Don't read things in where they don't belong. And that comes back to understanding yourself and understanding your own values, your needs, your beliefs. And where those are kind of soft, and then it affects our self-esteem and we can get bruised kind of easily. So I guess the nugget I would give is don't think emotionally. Don't let your emotions get carried away where they're thinking for you.
Jason, beautiful. Thank you. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, you can get a hold of me. You can drop me an email at jasonbcoach.com, or excuse me, at gmail.com, jasonbcoach@gmail.com. And also I wanted to plug this in. I'm working on a book right now, and I'm hoping to have it out by the summer. It's called The Firefighter's Way. Everything that I learned in recovering myself, digging myself out, taking command of my own life, I learned in the fire service. I really learned the whole framework for that. And then when everything fell apart, it was how I got through that, essentially, very simply said, and the framework for how I rebuilt myself, how I dealt with things that were at the time bigger than me, they were overwhelming me. So I'm looking forward to having that out this summer.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing that myself.
Thank you. Yep. You'll have a signed copy.
Great. All right, Jason, thank you so much. And folks out there, thank you. We'll be back with another episode of Mental Fitness Friday 1 week from today, from right now. So we'll see you then. Have a great rest of the day. Have an excellent weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Jason.